Welcome, everyone. I'm Erica Potheg, Vice President of Research to Action Lab at the Urban Institute and also its Chief Innovation Officer. We know that current events have placed even greater demands on your schedules, so we really want to thank you for taking the time to join us today as we announce this exciting opportunity for partnership between counties and the Urban Institute to boost upward mobility from poverty and reduce racial disparities. Next slide, please. For those of you not familiar with the Urban Institute, we're a nonprofit research organization that believes that decisions shaped by evidence have the power to improve public policy and practice, strengthen communities, and transform people's lives for the better. Urban researchers conduct social and economic policy and program research in all types of communities, from larger metropolitan areas to rural townships. Our work spans 12 research centers that you see covered here on this slide, covering impact areas such as criminal justice, health policy, and housing and community development. Next slide, please. Before we dive into the content of this webinar, let me briefly review some of the logistics and provide an overview of the agenda so you know what to expect. A recording of this webinar will be made publicly available on Urban's website. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use our Q&A feature to ask them. During the Q&A, we'll answer as many questions as we can, and other questions will be addressed in our updated FAQ on the website. Next slide, please. We're going to begin by sharing an overview of our collaboration with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the opportunity for counties to join the Upward Mobility Cohort. We'll explain the competitive application process, which begins with an RFI that's due on Wednesday, September 16th. Then we'll leave time to answer your questions during the Q&A. We hope today's session will leave you with a comprehensive understanding of this engagement and why we believe it's a great opportunity to support your counties. We're very excited to be supported by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation on this important work. They've been a partner for a number of years now, and I'll invite Kosar Jahani, who's a program officer at the foundation, to describe the background of our partnership and say a little bit more about the foundation's efforts to advance economic mobility and opportunity. Kosar, welcome to this webinar.
Thank you, Erica. Thanks for having me, and hello to everyone on the call. Like Erica said, I wanted to start with a bit of a history on the foundation's interest in this work. The impetus behind all of this is the well-documented fact that rates of upward economic and social mobility have been consistently decreasing in the United States over the last few decades. And we know as an organization that we won't be able to reach our goals in other domains such as education if we're not addressing the many barriers to opportunity that occur outside educational spaces like classrooms. Our partnership with the Urban Institute formally started in 2016. We partnered with them to host something called the U.S. Partnership on Mobility from Poverty. This initiative was made up of a diverse group of academics, practitioners, and community leaders, and they were all assembled to answer one very urgent question on our minds, which was, what would it take to dramatically increase mobility from poverty in the U.S.? And this partnership spent 2 years together, gathering insights from both research and practitioners and people with lived experience and people who were experiencing poverty. They traveled all over the country and they met with folks like yourselves, nonprofit program directors, the beneficiaries of those programs, and so on. Next slide, please. One of the main outcomes of the work of the partnership was the development of a more expansive definition of mobility that includes not just economic success, which is what we typically talk about, but also thinking about power and autonomy and a sense of being valued and having a sense of belonging in one's community. And these two additional elements really came out of the conversations that the initiative had with people with lived experiences of poverty. And the recognition that having control over one's life and having a capacity to influence both outcomes in your own life, but also larger policies that affect your future are key to experiencing upward mobility. And also that having the respect and dignity that comes from being valued in your community are also essential to experiencing upward mobility. And so one question that emerged for us from the partnership's work and this expanded definition was that how would we actually track and measure upward mobility if we were pegging to this definition? and how could we support local decision makers, much like yourselves, in measuring mobility in the short to intermediate term. Next slide, please. In late 2008, we partnered again with the Urban Institute to bring together a scholarly working group to develop a set of evidence-based metrics that communities could use to measure mobility. And the names of these folks, these are the folks that we've been partnering with over the last year. And they are the ones that have served as our thought partners and brought the evidence to the table that underlie the mobility framework that we'll be presenting throughout this work. Next slide, please. So this is a visual of the framework, and under the advice of the working group, as I mentioned, we've developed a set of 25 predictors and associated metrics that are strongly associated with long-term economic success, power and autonomy, and a sense of being valued in community. Now, we didn't just restrict our work to talking to scholars. The Urban Institute also assembled a cross-sectoral group of practitioners in a series of vetting labs last year to get feedback. And we and the Urban Institute really see this next phase of the work as a test. We see what we have as sort of a draft 1.0 of the mobility metrics, and where we're headed is to make sure that what we've been able to assemble so far is actually practical and usable for those that it was intended for. And that's where you all come into play. So we're really excited about this next phase of the work. We're especially excited to learn from you all. How is this framework helpful to you? Where does it fall short? And that's why we've structured this next phase of the work as an open call, where we're inviting eligible counties and communities to join us so we can expand this learning network and opportunity. And for details on that process, I'm going to turn it back to Erica.
Great, thank you, Kosar. And so let me say a little bit more about the metrics, how they were conceived, and how we see them being implemented, and where you all fit in. So the mobility metrics are really focused on local conditions, or the enabling environment that boost or block people's mobility, especially conditions that can be influenced by state and local policies. These metrics are intended to help communities measure these conditions and the local environment that supports the outcomes of individual residents. So taken together, this suite of metrics provides a valuable tool community leaders and local policymakers can use to do a number of things. One, compare their metrics, their community's metrics, to peer communities in order to assess the extent of the local mobility challenges. How are you divergent, or do you converge with other peer places? Enabling you to think about how to prioritize metrics where your community might diverge and may be weaker than other peer places. And then they also highlight interconnections among the predictors from multiple policy domains. So a really holistic picture of what's happening. And they would enable you to set targets for improving local mobility metrics, and then monitor those metrics over time to assess your community's progress. So if you'd like to learn more about the development of the metrics and the work that Kosar described, please visit the links provided in the RFI. Our project page also has a recording of a webinar we hosted that features members of the working group, and also former HUD Secretary and OMB Director Sean Donovan, who spoke to the power and the value of the metrics. So what's the opportunity here? The metrics are a powerful start to support communities in their efforts to improve upward mobility from poverty. But for metrics to be effective, it's critical to understand how they can be adopted and applied by local leaders to their own work, and to learn how they might be refined for greater impact. Next slide, please. So when thinking about how to boost upward mobility, counties are absolutely critical to this work. I am a huge believer in this. In my experience, counties are sometimes the most underappreciated yet important unit of government when it comes to driving change. And when you look at the policy areas covered by the mobility metrics, many of the authorities and systems that manage programs related to health, workforce development, and other areas are often managed by county governments. We've done work on creating a housing affordability gap map for counties, and it has become a phenomenal lever for action. I've seen how counties are able to leverage the data to drive their decisions and have deep impacts on their community and residents. We recognize that this is a time of national health economic, and social justice crisis. We need not only solidarity, but partnerships to overcome the challenges and inequities burdening our communities. Now more than ever, we need to collaborate to promote and ensure an inclusive recovery and equitable access to opportunity and ultimately upward mobility. Next slide, please. So to that end, the Urban Institute will be selecting up to 8 counties to comprise an upward mobility cohort. Members of this cohort will receive $125,000 in funding and 18 months of tailored technical assistance from urban experts to help county leaders use the mobility metrics to inform decision-making. This technical assistance will include support for data analysis, where urban staff will calculate mobility metrics for the county, compare these results to other jurisdictions, and work with county staff to analyze the mobility metrics and local administrative data to identify areas of weakness or strength and opportunities to better target strategies. Urban's technical assistance will also include support to form a cross-sector mobility coalition that engages local leaders or experts working on issues of mobility. TA will also involve policy and programmatic advising, where Urban will help counties co-develop a mobility action plan that identifies community priorities for promoting upward mobility. This plan will be informed by the mobility metrics, local data, and community engagement. Urban will advise on effective strategies, policies, and programs that have been demonstrated to improve mobility outcomes on the identified challenges. Finally, engagement in this cohort will include opportunities for peer learning, to share knowledge across the counties in the cohort, as well as engaging with experts and other organizations working on social and economic mobility. I'm going to turn it over now to Justin Milner, who's Associate Vice President for our Research to Action Lab, to give us an overview of the application process. Justin?
Great, thanks Erica, and hi everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're just thrilled to have you, especially on such short notice. And I'm going to do 2 things for my chunk of time now. First, I'm going to talk to you about how you might be a part of this exciting effort. And then I'm going to take some time at the end to answer questions. So if anything is top of mind for you right now, please hit the Q&A button and you can type your question there. And then we have a crack team who is working to assemble those questions, and I will do my best to answer at this time. We will also be sending out an updated list of frequently asked questions next week, so you can look for that as well. But let's get started. So first question, top of mind, who is this for? And can we go to the next slide, please? Right, so this opportunity is available to all counties in the 50 US states and District of Columbia, and includes county equivalents such as parishes in Louisiana, boroughs in Alaska, and consolidated city-county governments. So those places in which there are both, you are eligible and can apply. Next slide, please. So for the process itself, this is going to be a 2-stage application. And what we've released first, and what you've seen already, is the request for information, this RFI that we released last Friday. Again, this is open to all counties, and this is meant to be an initial letter of interest that shows a willingness and an interest and an ability to engage in this work. And that will be due on September 16th of this year at 11:59 p.m. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's 11:59, so you have the whole day, but that does give you time to work until the very end. So in any case, due on September 16th. From that pool of RFI applicants, we will be selecting 20 to 25 finalists, and word will be going out to those finalists on October 19th. So we're looking to turn this around in a month. The next stage then for the finalists, those 20 to 25 finalists, is we will actually be working with that group to calculate and share an initial cut of mobility metrics data and provide some limited technical assistance to help finalists interpret those results at this stage. Those finalists then will use that metrics data and to submit their full proposal which I'll talk about in just a second. Those applications, the finalist applications, will be due November 24th, and we will be notifying the final, the selected counties by the end of December 2020. But just to be clear, that's not the stage we're talking about now. We're talking about the RFI stage, and that's what you should be focused on, which is due on September 16th. Next slide, please. All right, so how do you apply? For this first stage of the RFI, we're using an application called Qualtrics. It's an online survey platform, very easy. We have already sent out the link to that form previously in this, and we may send it out again, so you can click on that and go straight to the page. In this stage, we are basically asking 3 questions, or 3 headings of questions, in which there's a few sub-questions, to better get a sense of your county's interest and ability to engage in this work. The first question asks about your county's current work to promote mobility and racial equity. And this is a chance to describe some of the existing projects, initiatives, strategies, ways to demonstrate your existing commitment to thinking about upward mobility and racial equity. The second question asks about your county's partnerships between departments. And that could be partnerships with cities, towns, other jurisdictions, and with external organizations as well. We're looking for this because partnership and engagement are so important to this project. It's a fundamental piece of what this work will look like. And so we're looking for a specific example or examples of those type of cross-sector projects. We're also looking in that question about how your county is engaging with residents, and so really seeking out that community voice. The last question that will be on the RFI is about capacity. And so this is thinking about your county capacity in 2 ways. First, we'll be asking about staff time and the ability to commit that staff time to be a part of this cohort, understanding that this will require real personnel resources in order to effectively engage. And second, we'll also be looking for an interest and ability in understanding and applying data. This is a data-driven initiative that will be core to the work. And so a capacity and a history of doing that work will also be important. So for all of those questions, we'll ask that you provide examples of your county engaging in those types of activities. Each question has space. There's a character limit of 4,000 characters that amounts to like 500 or 600 words. And so you will answer each question for 500 to 600 words. Again, I'll say it again, application is due September 16th, 11:59. Next slide, please. So at that point, then, the next stage, if you were selected as a finalist, they'll be notified again on October 19th. Finalist candidates will be asked to submit a full proposal. And as I mentioned earlier, Urban will be helping finalists to work with the initial cut of those mobility metrics and to put that into their final proposal, help to interpret that data, and would help to clarify their interest in the areas that they might work on as part of their final proposal. We are still developing the final RFP, and the questions in the application will be based on what we see in the letters of interest, but at a minimum, it will include at least 3 things. 1, we'll be looking for a demonstration of commitment and continuity from senior leadership and notable partners. The idea being this process this is a longer term engagement, and want to make sure that leadership will be engaged for that time period. Second, the proposal will ask for a description of key mobility challenges and priorities for engagement, and that would be based upon the work that you would have done with our team. And third, we will ask for a community engagement plan that details how the county strategies can reflect community priorities. Again, these final applications are due on November 24th, and we will be notifying selected counties in December 2020. Okay, next slide, please. So that is the nitty-gritty of how to apply. We think it is a relatively easy process, and we look forward to all the applications that we get in and reviewing the applications. now is time to take questions. So again, there is a box on the bottom of your screen that says Q&A. You can feel free to type your question there, and I will do my best to get to it. We will also be sending out an update to the FAQ next Tuesday, actually a week from Tuesday, on September 1st. So there will be updated answers to these and other questions at that time as well. So let me go to we have a first few questions here, and again, plenty of time to write in your own. First question, do counties need to have a certain size of population to apply? It's a great question. There is not a population size restriction or suggestion for applicants, and rural counties will definitely be considered. However, it's important to note that applicants will be asked to really demonstrate that they have the capacity to engage in this work. That's the most important thing. So we can imagine that larger counties may be more likely to meet those criteria, but no restriction or for population. Second question here. So what if our state doesn't have county governments? And so we know that there are some states that do not have functioning county governments. So in those states, if you're from one of those states where counties are just the geographic units, applicants should email upwardmobility@urban.org to propose an alternative geography for the engagement. However, it will be important, it will be, I should say, essential that a government partner is still the lead entity and the applicant. So we are opening this up to other proposals. This would be a chance for us to look into the possibilities of what our data allows, and we'll evaluate the feasibility of those alternative geographies, considering whether metrics data is there, and then we will respond. But please send us an email, and that will be the best way for us to get back to you. Here's a quick question. What can we use the $125,000 for? So we imagine that grant will be used primarily to fund staff time to work on the project, and also potential other direct costs, perhaps consultant for engaging in this work. Counties who are selected as finalists, so that's the second stage, will be asked to submit a proposed budget as part of the full proposal. So that's where we would ask for a bit more detail there. Okay, so let me see. Here's a good question too. I'm not part of a county government. How can my organization still be involved in this work? So in order for this initiative to be successful, we know that counties will require strong partnerships with other organizations, and that is in fact part of the proposals and something that we would like to see demonstrated. So we'd encourage you, if you're not a part of county government, but you still think this would be a good fit for your county, to reach out to county government contacts and encourage them to apply. And again, within the application, counties are asked to describe the partnership that they have with other types of local organizations. And this would be a perfect place to demonstrate that. And especially if there are specific examples of initiatives or strategies or projects in which you and county government or county government has worked to promote upward mobility and racial equity. Okay, let's see. Does the county government lead have to be from the county administration or commissioner's offices? So the lead point of contact within the county should be a senior staff member that has the authority to assemble a project team that has staff across relevant departments and to keep elected leadership updated on project progress. That is really important. We'll know that that person will play that sort of linchpin role for this project in bringing folks together. So but while we imagine leaders from county administration offices or commissioners' offices are well positioned to play that role, you could also imagine senior staff from other departments that have that sort of cross-cutting role within county government to also play that lead point of contact. So that's a long way of saying, no, they don't have to be specifically from those offices. There are other places where we might imagine those point of contacts coming from. However, it really does need to be someone who has the authority, the juice, let's say, to bring people together and keep a project like this moving. So here's a question, just came in. It says, given the shortest turnaround between today and the RFI due date, is a letter or resolution from county elected officials, oh, this just disappeared on my screen. Let me see, where did it go? Okay, there it is. Is a letter or resolution from county elected officials due with the submission of the RFI, or is this to be submitted with the RFP? So a letter is from county elected officials is not due as part of the RFI, but it would be a part of the full RFP if the county is selected for that second phase. Okay, I am looking at, let's see, here's a question. Any advice for jurisdictions in the midst of a leadership transition with a mayoral election in November? Thinking we try and get support from both current and incoming administrations, and that's sort of the question. That's a great question, and appreciate that sort of sensitivity that we are in a time of election that is coming up in the next couple months. So ideally, the application could support from both administrations, but at this RFI stage, demonstration of ability to continue to work on this through a transition would be really important. The full proposal, as I said, that's due on November 24th, requires a letter of commitment from the county elected official or a board. So just keep that in mind with the timing of the transition. And please let us, feel free to reach out with additional detail if you have questions there. Okay, let's see. So another question here is around what TA will look like. And we talked about this a bit, but just so that you have a sense of what this would be, is an urban team, and we'll have small teams from urban working with each site, supporting data analysis. So it would be really looking at what do the metrics say for a given county and how they compare to other jurisdictions and where they might be lacking and where disparities might exist. We'd also be thinking about how best to support stakeholder engagement. So helping counties identify and engage local leaders to develop cross-sector partnerships. And then finally, we'd be supporting on the development of the mobility action plan. And this is really the big product of this work that will highlight community priorities as well as mobility challenges and help to point towards potential policies and programs that could help address those priorities, as well as some thoughts on implementation. So I hope that covers that question. I'm going to give a few more seconds for people to write in questions to see what else is coming. So we have one here. So how will this project support efforts to promote greater racial equity? And so we would say, issues of structural racism are central to our definition of mobility and to our approach of improving access to opportunity, especially for people of color who face additional structural barriers to economic mobility. And so the data analysis aims to highlight many of these disparities, and the technical assistance and the policy and program recommendations will really focus on thinking about how best to reduce some of those racial inequities and target strategies to support marginalized groups. And so we see this as central to part of the work. And in the application, both the RFI and the RFP, we really encourage you to demonstrate how your county is working on such issues at this time or thinking about racial equity and how this opportunity might actually support you in those efforts. Okay, I think this one just came in. Can urban assist counties in applying mobility metrics, data analysis, et cetera, to existing community engagement upward mobility plans. And so urban can support each county to partner with existing local coalitions who are focused on mobility. And we're open to and interested in building off of those existing initiatives. But we do see the mobility metrics as a central feature of this work. And it's obviously the central feature of this project. So we would want that to be an important part of helping to understand and set priorities, even within an existing structure. But that's a great question, and one that if there are such efforts underway, would be a perfect place to show in the RFI to demonstrate that work and give us a sense of the kind of engagement that already exists, is already ongoing. So great question. Let's see. Okay, if our county isn't selected, will we still receive the calculations for our mobility metrics? And so yes, our goal is yes. We expect that we'll be able to produce and share mobility metrics data with all interested applicants, but we also understand that it may take some additional time to share those reports for all applicants beyond the selected finalists. So so it might not be an immediate turnaround, just to set expectations, and we would not be able to provide technical assistance to help with the interpretation, but we would be sharing the data itself. Okay, a couple more questions here. Will data provided be disaggregated by race and gender, and race plus gender? So as part of the technical assistance process with counties selected for the cohort, we expect to be able to disaggregate local data by race, gender, and race plus gender wherever possible. However, with the initial metrics data and calculations that we provide during the application process, those likely will not be disaggregated. We probably will not be able to take that step at this stage. Okay, is the $125,000 funding available for a specific period of time, or is it a one-time award? So this funding is available over the 18-month implementation period of the project. So it will be there, and it is a grant. It will be cost reimbursable, which means that the funding will be distributed over the course of the grant. And we will have more details about this. I know this is an important piece of information. We'll have more details about that in the full RFP for those that are selected as finalists. So it is super clear how that will work, how that process will work. Okay, great. A couple more questions and then we may wrap up. So here's a question, is urban amenable to local additions or modifications to the key metrics, especially around qualitative data or other indicators? So this is a great question. I think urban, we see these mobility metrics as a suite of metrics, and counties that end up in the cohort as part of this process will need to commit to working with the full set of metrics. We see them as complementary and intertwined. And so it's important to think about this holistically. But we also recognize that this is very much a first phase for rolling out this work. So this is a learning phase, and it will be one of the big questions for us is how might these metrics be refined? And so part of the process over the next 18 months, we'll be thinking about how might these metrics be refined so that they better encapsulate the kinds of questions and the kind of analysis that's going to be helpful for counties to really produce upward mobility and racial equity in the coming years. Okay, one more question I'm seeing here that says, are local governments in U.S. territories eligible? So right now, only counties and county equivalents in the 50 states and in District of Columbia are eligible. And that's because so many of the data sources used in the mobility metrics just aren't consistently available at the local level in U.S. territories. So that is with deep reservations that we are not able to include applicants from those territories at this time. Okay, cool. I'm going to wait 10 more seconds, and I think we've gone through a lot of questions. Thank you so much. These are fabulous questions. We will also be taking questions through our website. Through our email address. And so feel free to email us. That's both on the RFI and on the project website. And we'll be accepting questions through this coming Tuesday, the 25th, and then looking to turn around an updated FAQ by the following Tuesday, September 1st. Okay, one more question. I think that just came in. It says, our county and city are preparing to apply to the HUD mobility demonstration. Do you believe that the mobility cohort should happen first? So to be clear, HUD's mobility demonstration focuses on neighborhood mobility initiatives for housing voucher holders. And this upward mobility, the upward mobility in this project really is focusing on upward mobility as the broader issue of increasing economic and social mobility in the US for those experiencing poverty. So strategies like housing mobility would be a component of that, would be one aspect, but we're really thinking about a larger definition here, a broader lens. So it's not something that, we wouldn't say it's apples to apples there, but you can imagine those efforts being complementary. Okay, one other question just came in. What kind of proprietary and confidential information would Urban need to gain access to? So almost all of the mobility metric data that we are pulling together are actually nationally and publicly available. So the calculations of the metrics will not require any confidential data. Local data can be used to supplement the mobility metrics, and Urban can work with counties who are interested in analyzing local data to better understand mobility challenges in their communities. And that might be a great place to point to existing work that's already being done. But otherwise, no other proprietary or confidential information will be required to participate. We will be organizing data from sources that already exist and can be easily pooled to support comparison for different counties in different places. Great. All right. This is the third time I'm going to say, okay, couple more, the final round. If there's any late breaking questions, I think we are good. So I just want to thank everybody again for taking time on this Thursday afternoon. We know how busy you are. We were thrilled to have you join us today on short notice. Really appreciate all your questions. Please email us if you have others. You see the email here, upwardmobility@urban.org. Email us questions, concerns. We are there. Then remember that date for the first RFI. Again, thank you so much. We really appreciate it and look forward to reading your application soon.